Well, thank you everyone for being here for the rescheduled March 2026 IHC monthly meetup. We're doing this a week early just because of some conflicts with some other events next week, and also so you all have the absolute latest information before our day of action tomorrow, March 12th. So can everyone see this okay? Hear me all right? Perfect. Real quick, I know you are all familiar with IHC, but just a reminder, we are a 501c4 organization. We work with John and Cindy Peterson and their daughter Libby. You will probably meet Cindy and Libby tomorrow if you'll be at the Hill. And our mission is working to end hunger in Iowa through education, advocacy, and policy change rooted in justice. These are our three guiding principles you can find more about if you visit our website. Okay, well, jumping right into it, some state legislative updates. And you are getting the most, the freshest updates. I haven't even sent an email about some of this and was just trying to understand more of some of this vote yesterday. So we're going to start by covering some of the welfare reform efforts that we've seen in the state legislature this year. So the House bill, House File 2716, this did pass the House yesterday, and I will get into that in just a minute. But this includes a number of harmful provisions. You may remember this was 696 when it was still a study bill. That's a typo. This should be House Study Bill 696. So this does a number of things. Division 1 pertains to SNAP. It has it requests a quarterly report on the payment error rate, which we think is probably a good thing for legislators to have. Then there's 5, or is this only 4 SNAP waivers now? I might need to double check. Some are good, some are bad. I think the worst one is around benefit expungement, where if people were not using their benefits for 3 months, that the state could expunge them. There's some concerning language where it's of inactivity or of benefits remaining on the card. So it's unclear, if people just roll over a balance for 3 months, if that would get removed from their account or what. So that's bad. There is some reporting on the payment error rate and fraud rates. We're basically neutral on that. And I think the payment error rate report could be a good thing for legislators to have. The fraud reports, that's all reports that are already put out. So it's actually duplicative. The most concerning pieces are sections 12 and section 16, or 15. Section 12 is this 12 months residency requirement. It would require all applicants to public assistance programs to have 12 months continuous residency in the state in order to qualify. Well, this goes against federal law. States are not allowed to impose durational residency requirements for WIC, SNAP, and Medicaid. But also, there's a number of good reasons why this would be a really bad idea. For victims of domestic violence who are fleeing, they would, have to be in the state for 12 months before they could get benefits. For people who are maybe recent arrivals to the state who are pregnant. This would also, in effect, ban refugees from WIC, Medicaid, other programs. Any recent arrivals within the past 12 months would not be eligible until they have a 12-month continuous residency. We're not super clear on the intention of this piece, but given the fact that it specifically loops in childcare assistance, I think the subtext this one is kind of Somali daycares in Minneapolis, and we don't want that in Iowa. And that, I think, is the intention here. Obviously, very problematic piece of the bill. More problematic, maybe equally problematic, is this WIC eligibility restricting based on citizenship. WIC is basically the only nutrition program other than free and reduced price school meals that does not have a citizenship requirement. And I think there is very good reason for that. We're talking about a very specific, narrow population: pregnant and postpartum women, infants, and young children. There was an amendment on the bill that cleared up that U.S. citizen children would still qualify. That really didn't change anything about the bill, and our concern was always, this is going to affect undocumented mothers. There's also some legal humanitarian immigrants that this would restrict WIC from as well. And then there's this other piece that I will admit kind of flew under the radar or over my head. And it was one change to an implementation piece. So Senate File 494 passed a few years back, did a number of harmful things, including implementing an asset test for SNAP. It was supposed to be implemented by July of 2025. It still has not been implemented. And this bill would direct the state to implement it by January 1st, 2027, which is not what their current timeline is for implementation. During House debate yesterday, a fiscal note came out, which is always great when a fiscal note comes out while they're debating the bill. It shows they haven't really taken the time to understand the impact. That fiscal note showed that this bill, House File 2716, would cost the state of Iowa $44 million in fiscal year 27 for this budget. And the reason being, when you look at the fiscal note, it's a big fiscal note. It's 11 pages long, which is pretty big for a fiscal note. A lot of that is because of this piece that would require the implementation of 494 by January 1st, 2027. And Representative Harris on the floor yesterday basically said, no, I'm not sure I believe the fiscal note. Like, it just came out. I have some questions. I want to have us all take a little trip back to 2 years ago. Senate File 494 is being voted on, and the floor manager in the House, Joel Fry, says, I don't believe this fiscal note that we just saw from HHS. It says it's going to cost all this money. Frankly, I don't believe it. Well, so they didn't appropriate money to implement 494. And that's the reason why we're here now, still hasn't been implemented, because they never gave HHS the funding to implement it. So they write in this bill, hey, you're going to implement this by next January. So HHS comes back and says, okay, here's our fiscal note from 2 years ago that you didn't believe. And Representative Harris says, I don't believe this fiscal note that we just got from HHS. So a big chunk of this fiscal note is directing the state to implement 494 by January 1st, 2027. And a huge chunk of that actually has to do with the state child support recovery unit and some specifications for Medicaid that were in 494 is a huge chunk of it. It's like 40 million, 30 million maybe of the 44. But I want to make something clear here. This WIC provision, restricting WIC eligibility based on citizenship, the fiscal note clearly states this would cost the state of Iowa $500,000 in IT costs this year to implement. So keep that in mind when we're up there tomorrow, talking about Double Up Food Bucks, talking about the Choose Iowa program, and having people ask, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to find the money for these priorities? Because that's what we're told when we come asking for Double Up Food Bucks or investments in the Choose Iowa food purchasing program that have strong bipartisan support is, hey, this is a great idea. Where's the money going to come from? So that's my question here. When we're talking about feeding Iowans, it's always, where's the money going to come from? When we're talking about kicking Iowans off food programs, they have no problem dropping $500,000 to do that. And I'm sorry if you can hear it in my voice, but I'm a little pissed off about this. And so be sure to bring that up. It's all about priorities. If you're asked, where are we going to find the money? Maybe flip that and say, well, the House just passed this welfare reform bill that's going to cost the state $44 million. Where are we going to find the money to do that? Like, maybe we could not pass that bill and instead direct, $1 million for Double Up and 500,000 for Choose Iowa, and we've just saved $42.5 million. Great job, legislators. So this fiscal note, I think, will probably work in our advantage on the Senate side because it is a huge price tag. And there are legislators who are going to balk at that price tag. But I want to make clear a huge chunk of it is from that implementation of 494, but still that WIC piece alone, $500,000 that the state would have to pay to remove people from WIC, which is going to lead to a loss in federal funding. And I will note that loss in federal funding actually isn't included in the fiscal note. That projection is not included. The only piece on the WIC part is this is what it's going to cost us to implement the IT changes, not how many people are going to get kicked off the program and what is that loss of federal funding to our WIC clinics going to be. So that's the House bill. The Senate also had this bill, Senate File 2422. We had originally been opposed to this when it was 3140. We did change our registration to undecided, and I want to explain why. In the initial Senate study bill, it had this section that would basically direct the state to refer non-applicant household members who didn't list their citizenship status to the federal government. So basically for mixed status households who maybe has a member who is not applying for SNAP, but they still have to list that household member, it would require them to ask for citizenship status and report it to the federal government, which was an issue for us. Because that language got removed, this bill really just codifies current policy. And because it just codifies current policy, and we really have to pick our battles up there, that's why we changed our registration to undecided. But I want to be clear, we still have some concerns with this. I spoke at the subcommittee yesterday, and I mean, this does codify changes from HR 1, but it's very selective in what it's choosing to codify. There were a lot of changes made in HR 1. This does not codify changes to the standard utility allowance. It does not codify changes to work reporting requirements. The only piece it codifies is immigrant eligibility. So they don't need to be on the record voting to ban refugees from SNAP. But that's what this bill would do. Again, refugees have already been banned from SNAP through HR 1, but this would just create that in Iowa code too. So we believe it's unnecessary, but it doesn't actually change current practice. So where things stand with these two bills, the House bill passed the House yesterday. It passed a floor vote yesterday. There was one Republican who voted against it, Representative Chad Ingalls, and one Democrat who voted in favor of it, Representative Dan Goza. Otherwise, it was a pretty clean party line split. There were, I think, 8 non-voting members of both parties. They were either absent or chose not to vote. For instance, I saw Representative Turek didn't vote. This piece included the MEPD Work Without Worry improvements, which he has been a big advocate for. And so I think he did not want to vote against the bill because it had the positive changes to the MEPD program, which also threw away. I mean, I'm just talking about the SNAP pieces. There were a number of other pieces on both of these bills. The Senate bill codifies the use of MCOs, ends Medicaid retroactive eligibility. Like, there's some bad parts about the Senate bill on the Medicaid side. So anyway, that bill did pass the House. The fiscal note came out during floor debate. That has already been referred to Senate HHS. This bill has to pass Senate HHS committee by next Friday, which is the second funnel. We have had some really good conversations with Senator Carol Warmy, who is the head of Senate HHS. She does not like this WIC provision and has some real issues with the House bill. So one of our goals for tomorrow is going to be talking with senators on Senate HHS, especially Senator Warmy, and really encouraging them to reject this House bill. And if they're not going to be rejecting it outright, pushing for amendments to get sections 12 and 15 removed. That was our ask in the House, is if we couldn't kill the bill entirely, removes section 12 and 15 because those are the most harmful pieces. We can also point to that price tag, for the overall fiscal note, but also that WIC piece specifically. You know, is it a good use of state funds to spend $500,000 to kick people off of nutrition assistance that we will then be getting less federal funding for the WIC program, and really hammering this bill with senators? Now, we weren't actually sure. Each chamber had its different versions, and they were not companion bills. They were not linked in the state system as similar bills, but each had their own kind of version. So right now, the Senate has passed their welfare reform bill, and sent it over to the House. The House has passed their welfare reform bill and sent it over to the Senate. Frankly, we think the Senate version is a lot better as it relates to SNAP. But if both of them don't want to pass either one's bill, that would be perfectly fine with me. And so really our goal here is trying to get neither of these passed. But if they are going to pass one, we would prefer the Senate version because there is less damage done to SNAP and WIC. So both of those we will be trying to stop, but we will be putting much more attention toward that House bill that is in the Senate. I'm going to take a minute just to check questions. Does it include housing assistance? It does not. Yeah. TANF for housing. Good point, Paige. Yeah. Thanks for answering those questions in the chat. Okay, so any questions on the welfare reform bill? We will have talking points on this. So when you're chatting, you can say, our ask is to strike sections 12 and 15. Here's why, here are our concerns. But any questions on those bills?
Sorry, Luke, I'm just curious, why was that fiscal note so big? Is it just child support recovery, people, or kind of their IT?
Yeah, it's primarily FTEs, full-time employees. And I forget, it's like 60 or something employees that HHS would need to add to the child support team. Basically, I think what it did, and I will need to go back and look, but it changed Medicaid eligibility so that in order to qualify for Medicaid, you need to be cooperating with the child support recovery unit. And I think that's for both parents, whether they are custodial or non-custodial. It could just be custodial. I might need to look back. But this would be a sizable population that don't have official child support payments set up through the state. That does not mean that they don't have some sort of arrangement set up with, that other parent. I am not well versed in child support and Medicaid policy, but yes, if you look at the fiscal note, Kelly, that is the big chunk of it, is that child support for Medicaid system.
And do you think there's such a disconnect between the House and the Senate Rs that the Senate's just gonna be like, yeah, no, we're not even gonna consider this.
That's my hope. That's my hope, is that the Senate is just like, no, we passed our bill. If you want to see a welfare reform bill, take up 2422. And there was a House subcommittee on 2422. Sorry, I meant to mention this yesterday. So the same day the House voted on their welfare reform bill, they also had a subcommittee on the Senate's welfare reform bill, which we were hoping like, oh, maybe they'll just say, oh, we're going to take the Senate bill and do a strike and replace and we'll just pass this. That's not what happened. But it is a sign that maybe the House is going to move the Senate bill and the Senate is just going to say, no, we passed our version. If you want welfare reform, make an amendment to that, which then they would have to send it back. And in the House subcommittee yesterday, Representative Ann Meyer said, we're going to need to see some changes to this. So they probably will amend that Senate bill. And so honestly, at this point, the more they are not on the same page for us, the better.
Luke, okay, so if we're talking to our senators about the HF 2716, does it now have a different number once it's at the Senate? No, it stays the same.
Is
Okay.
the same number. Yep.
Right, thanks.
That's not always true, but in this case it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will go through our asks at the end of this, but that is one of our asks for tomorrow, is asking senators for a no vote on 2716. Okay, so moving on to the Maha bills. You have probably been following this. The governor, in her condition of the state address, expressed that she wanted to see the state codify the SNAP waiver restriction that has been in place since January 1st. I don't have the original language here. This is just the cleaned up waiver language, which is still pretty messy, I will say. We did not draft this language. We didn't craft it. But they did amend the language to address some of the concerns. So in the initial language, it was, very clearly linking summer EBT and potentially even SNAP to having a waiver in place, gave HHS directors sole discretion over what was going to be in that waiver. Which I think is still an unwritten part of this. I think HHS and the governor would still be deciding that. But we think this language is a little better. I will say, because of this word request, the department shall continuously request that USDA grants them this waiver approval. It doesn't say that we are making summer EBT participation on contingent on having a waiver in place. It just says we're going to request one. So yes, maybe this could direct a future governor to request a modification. But I also think some of this language is kind of confusing. Requesting a modification to the list of eligible foods to only include those that are eligible as of January 1st. Well, that list of eligible foods in 7 CFR, the federal code, has not changed. Just because we have a waiver, that list has not changed. I think some of this language is probably good for us. I think the only concerning piece in my point of view, well, we would just prefer they didn't do any of this language, but this last piece that I think was meant to address some retailer concerns about, the HHS director basically said in a subcommittee that our current waiver is a starting point, that they would like to make further changes in the future to the waiver. And so I think that caused some concern among the retailers. They were pushing to have the taxable list kind of codified, but where it ended up is that HHS can make future modifications, but that they would need to provide the retailers with UPC codes and instructions ahead of time Well, maybe not ahead of time because it says the department shall implement the modification upon approval. So this is the part that causes me some concern. So if HHS gets an additional modification from USDA, let's say we're going to ban bakery goods or something, they would just enact that immediately without giving folks time and heads up on that change, according to this. So I think that is a cause for concern. I'm going to bring up the chat real quick to see if there's any questions on this. So I will say this was a small win, getting this language changed. I do think this language is better in a lot of ways. So that was a small win. The House did pass their Maha bill, and that was the amended language that we just saw. They also decided to include a number of other amendments, last-minute amendments that were filed the night before this bill was voted on. And one of those amendments would request a waiver for school nutrition standards. And this is language that was passed last year in House File 851. The Senate did not take that up. And so I think this is a House attempt to restart this conversation. But that language in 851 and now in this bill in House File 2676 now would waive federal nutrition standards for school meals and would instead direct the state to come up with our own school meal standards, prioritizing Iowa's cultural foods like pork, corn, and dairy, and it elevates animal-based protein to the top of the list, cuts out whole grain requirements entirely. I mean, plain and simple, this is a meat industry bill. And we saw this waiver or this waiver language from this last year's bill as an amendment that was adopted and passed in House File 2676. There were also a number of other education related. I think it was interesting, like this is an HHS bill, but it changes the physical activity requirement, requiring 30 minutes of PE every day. It would direct, like there's an extracurricular requirement that students would be required to do one extracurricular activity. Frankly, I think some of these amendments might serve the same purpose in the Senate of causing some concerns. That's what we thought, at least. But you know, the Senate had their own bill, the House had their own bill, the House passed their bill. And what we saw the day after the House passed their bill is a strike and replace amendment was introduced to the Senate bill. And the Senate bill has already passed their subcommittee and committee and is eligible for floor debate. So that means at any day, not today that I've seen, the Senate could take Senate File 2367 up for a vote. And the very first thing that would happen is Senator Warmy would introduce that strike and replace amendment to Senate File 2367 to replace the language in the Senate bill with the language that passed the House, which would effectively take that House bill language and put it in the Senate bill and take it up for a vote. So we are also going to be talking with our senators tomorrow about this bill, Senate File 2367, but really that House File 2676. And these really concerning pieces. Yes, we'll talk about the SNAP waiver codification piece and why that's bad, but we'll also be talking about the school nutrition piece and why that is a really bad idea, waiving federal nutrition standards for school meals. So I've talked about the bad things. I'm going to pivot now to talk about the happy things. So a couple of our priorities that we're still working on, double up food bucks. We're still working to see a $1 million appropriation for double up food bucks. That has hit some snags. Senate Study Bill 3145 had a $1 million appropriation for double up food bucks. It also included the governor's tobacco tax proposal, and that did not pass committee in the Senate. It actually failed to pass with a 10 or a 9-8 vote. It had more yeses, but it needed 10. And so that bill actually failed. We have also not seen movement on Senate File 2027, which was introduced this session by Senator Dawson. It's technically still alive and still eligible, but there has not been a subcommittee. And then House File 970, that was the bill that passed the House last year that we advocated against because it includes the $1 million appropriation, but also included that language about a waiver for SNAP. House File 970 is still eligible in the Senate. There was a Senate subcommittee assigned, meaning they have the 3 people assigned to that bill in the Senate, but a meeting has not been scheduled. This might be a sign that the Senate is looking at that bill as a vehicle for a double up food bucks appropriation. We are, again, opposed to that waiver language, but given that the state already has a waiver in place, you know, that really wouldn't change anything. So if that is the route they go, that may be an opportunity for double up food bucks funding. I will also note, we don't need a bill for this funding. I mean, we need an appropriations bill to include it in the budget, but we don't actually need a policy bill to pass through chambers to have a $1 million appropriation for double up food bucks included in the budget. That can be an ask for our appropriators to include a $1 million appropriation for double up in the state budget. So while it helps to have a bill, because then it kind of forces them to put it in there, it doesn't require a bill to appropriate that money. And last year, it was in the House budget and not in the Senate budget at the end of the session, ultimately was not included in the final budget. So we can also just be advocating with all of our House and Senate members to include double up in the budget, whether or not we have a bill. And then I want to talk about the Choose Iowa food purchasing programs. Secretary Nag, who is our Secretary of Agriculture, announced at the start of this session the Iowa Farm Act. It has a lot in that bill. But one thing that we like is it expands the Choose Iowa food purchasing program to schools. And it also makes some changes to the food bank purchasing program, just some language cleanup. And so we are supportive of that provision of the Farm Act. The House version, House File 2340, passed a House Ways and Means Subcommittee this morning. Senate File 2465, I believe, is eligible for floor debate now. I'm not sure that they will debate it yet, but that is something that, you know, we can talk with senators about too, is our support for this provision. And I want to be clear here, this Iowa Farm Act, it does create the Choose Iowa Farm to School program. It does not appropriate any funding. And so that's something we'll want to be clear when we're talking with legislators is we support this. We're so glad to see this program made permanent. We also need to make sure we actually fund this program. So that is another thing we'll be making an ask on, is to see state investment in both the Choose Iowa Choose Iowa Food Bank purchasing program and school purchasing program. And I meant to delete that slide because I have it on here, but finally, just talking about the state budget and summer EBT. And these are kind of some general education pieces we can be doing with all of our legislators. Due to HR1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed last year, starting this October, states are going to be required to cover 75% of the administrative costs for SNAP. That's up from 50%. For the state of Iowa, for this budget year, that's approximately $11 million that the state needs to make up in our budget. The governor's budget also contains about $20 million for technology upgrades through that technology reinvestment fund to modernize our SNAP IT system, which is, at this point, our computer system is older than I am. I believe it's about 40 years old, our current SNAP IT system. And so it's badly needed to be upgraded. So we are supportive of that 20 million additional ask to upgrade that IT system. We also need to ensure that admin funding for summer EBT is included in the state budget. That was not included in the governor's initial budget. When I asked, they said it's because they were not sure when they were drafting the budget whether or not the state would be participating in summer EBT. But I also know that this is something that the HHS is working to have included. So I think it was not intentionally left out of the budget. It was kind of too late in the process or an oversight. So making sure that that is included in the budget. So just again, when you're talking with legislators, making sure that the state is investing adequately for HHS to be administering summer EBT and SNAP. Okay, any questions? I'm going to maybe jump ahead to this real quick because I went over all of these bills and now I'm trying to kind of simplify it a bit for how we're going to talk about this tomorrow. So these positive pieces on the bottom, we can be talking about with everyone, House and Senate. Double up food bucks appropriation, support for Choose Iowa food purchasing programs, and making sure that HHS has the dollars they need to administer SNAP and summer EBT. So you can be talking about those with all members of the House and Senate. When we're talking with the Senate, we're going to have some very specific targets for Senate HHS and House File 2716, and specifically lobbying those senators to try and kill that bill in committee or get sections 12 and 15 removed. So we'll have our list of key legislators. We've got groups kind of broken out who will have folks assigned. And we'll be trying to do some specific targeting there on Senate HHS committee. And then with all senators bringing up that MAHA bill that already passed the House that includes the SNAP waiver codification language and that school nutrition piece that's really harmful, we can be talking with all senators about voting no on that bill. So we'll probably be a little more strategic on 2716 of trying to target the committee members, specific asks on strike sections 12, 15, whatever. For all senators, we're going to be asking them vote no on that Senate File 2367, which is the strike and replace of the House MAHA bill. When we're talking with House members, there's that Senate welfare reform bill I mentioned that is not as bad. It just codifies current language. But we should still be applying some pressure on the House. We don't have a direct ask to vote no like we do with the Senate bills. Because honestly, if they're going to pass a bill, we would prefer for it to be the Senate version. But we still want to bring up our concerns with that. So we can be talking with the House members and be saying, look, this bill's really unnecessary. It doesn't change any existing policy. But it would, if you want to be on the record voting to ban refugees from SNAP, that's what that bill would do. And so addressing or bringing up our concerns with House members. So any questions? I know this is a lot of information and a lot of it is very specific sections, language. Again, we'll have all of this on a talking points sheet for you. So, you know, okay, if I'm talking with a senator, here are the things I need to be bringing up. If I'm talking with a member of the House, here are the things I need to be bringing up. And have that language all right in front of you. I shared this on our advocacy training call last Thursday, but it's less important for you to know all the specific details of the bill. It's more important for you to be able to share why this is important to you and how it will impact your community. And so that's what we really need from all our advocates. Paige will be there. I will be there. We'll have other folks who know more of the finer details of this bill. If you get a question from a senator and want to flag us over. But what is really important for all our advocates to be doing is talking about why they care about hunger, their work, why they care about this bill, how it will impact them, and making that personal and kind of constituent community focused case, and maybe not get into all of the weeds of the bill. If that's what a legislator wants to do, we can do that. But really leading with the personal stories is the most important piece. All right, any questions?
Hey Luke, I just got an alert like this morning that House File 851 was reassigned to subcommittee, which is the same language that's in their MAHA bill that was amended for the school nutrition standards. So I don't know, is the thinking, because I've heard from other people who have talked to their senators that they don't like the MAHA bill. So I don't know if they're thinking that bill's gonna die, so they're gonna bring this one back. I don't know.
That
But I
is
didn't know if anyone else had context. Yeah.
that is great intel, Caitlin. That's the first I'd heard about that. So thank you so much. And probably need to bring that up with senators too, because so yeah, so I'm guessing that's like a Senate subcommittee got assigned.
House committee. So it's Driscoll, Zimmer, and Zubach.
No, that is the
Okay,
Senate. That's a
but it's
Senate
for the
sub.
House
Oh, that's
bill.
Senate. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's what I was gonna say too, Caitlin, is I had the same, when I saw your comment about that, I had the same question of, does that mean maybe they don't want to take up the House version bill? And so they're gonna do this instead, but they did do that strike and replace. So then I don't know. I don't know what that means anymore.
that that was the confusing part to me too, was the strike and replace amendment. Because I kind of assumed the Senate was going to be like, no, we've got our own version. And so seeing that, like, if they didn't like that piece, then why would they do the strike and replace? So, but okay. Well, thank you, Caitlin. That's good information. It could be that, yeah, just the proponents of that school nutrition bill are worried about it in the Senate. So they're trying to get it moved separately in 851. So I will add that of our list of bills to be mentioning with legislators. And definitely those three who were assigned the sub, we can be asking and hopefully get some more information tomorrow. I might be able to get up there this afternoon too. I was maybe going to be going up to the Capitol today. And so if I can do some asking around too today, I'll see if I can learn anything more.
Okay. That'd be great.
And
Thanks.
Caitlin, if you wanted to do your own outreach, Driscoll is the chair of agriculture, and that's the committee that's sitting in. And she's one of the subcommittee members on that bill. So I would say reaching out to her, because she kind of has the power in terms of like, does that actually get scheduled for a meeting, or did they assign a sub, but maybe they're not going to end up right? Like that's kind of in her court now. And then Zimmer is the Dem on it, and he's the ranking member for Ag. So you could reach out to him as well and see if he knows anything.
Okay. I'll send him a message tonight. We'll see.
Yeah, Zimmer would be good because he was a former school superintendent too, I think.
Yep. And a
Oh,
principal.
yeah.
Oh, principal. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I
which I only know
brought up
because he was one of my friend's principals growing up.
yeah, I brought up this bill with like our elementary science and social studies coach when I met with her last week. And she was like, where are we gonna fit this in? Like to add these nutrition education, which don't get me wrong, I want nutrition education in schools. But I also have issue with like them putting like the importance of animal-based protein. Like they really skew it to like the MAHA agenda. And then like that's not what nutrition education should be in schools. So yeah, I think like if education associations are I don't know if they're hearing about this bill or paying attention to it, but I'm sure they would probably have issues with adding yet another thing into required curriculum. So yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's a great point, Caitlin. And for the Maha bill specifically, I know there's been a lot of school groups that have had issues with those amendments. Like the PE requirement, I was talking with someone who was like, we don't have enough space in our buildings to have 30 minutes of PE for every class. Like, because we
Well, for
use our gym
sure.
for lunch too. So some of those education provisions may kill that Maha bill in the Senate. But yeah, that's really curious about the subcommittee. And I will note Driscoll and Zumbaugh are pretty ag heavy senators. They're both on ag. They are both farmers. And I'm guessing they would be very supportive of this bill.
Mhm. Okay, good to know. Good to know.
So we will stay tuned, I guess. And thank you for the heads up, Caitlin. Seriously, thank you so much, because that was not on my radar. So good to know going into tomorrow. And I think it's really helpful that the Food System Coalition Day on the Hill is next week too, because we can be talking with folks about this tomorrow. And if we still see movement next week, we can, those of us who will be there next Wednesday can kind of revisit it too then. Okay, well, any other questions? Sorry, I know I ended up talking longer than I had planned to. Sorry. Okay, well, we really hope to see you tomorrow. And we'll be there 7 to 11. Reminders real quick, contact your representative and senator if you have not already. Send them a note, let them know you'll be there tomorrow. Ask if if they would be able to meet in person. This morning, I did drop off invites, so every House member and every senator at least they'll know we're going to be there. But we'll be at the Capitol from 7 to 11. We'll be in the legislative dining room from 7 to 9, lobbying legislators from 9 to 11. Please join us whenever you're able to. Like, if you can't make it at 7, don't think that that means you shouldn't come. We know that's early, and we've got people from all across the state traveling here. So whenever you are able to join, we will appreciate however much advocacy you can do. If you're not able to get to Des Moines until a little later, we're officially ending the day at 11. But you are welcome to stay longer, stick around and meet with legislators. If you reach out to your senator and they say, oh, I'd love to meet, but I'm not free until 1 in the afternoon, you can feel free to grab lunch, whether that's at the Capitol or somewhere else, and then come back. That's entirely up to you. But our program will be from kind of 7 to 11. And I'm sure we'll have people around that afternoon too, if you do, have questions or things like that. So feel free to stick around longer. Okay, any final questions? I'm going to check the chat again. And thank you, Paige, for sharing that. Find your legislator. So,
So,
all right. Well, we
Luke,
will have a lot to talk about. Oh yeah, go ahead.
so any much technical questions can be directed to you or Paige there.
Yep. Yeah,
Like,
Paige and I will both be
I'm not
there.
well versed in policies and all. I'm more tech, computer science tech guy. So any policy, deep policy related questions can be directed to you and then Paige there.
Yep. Yeah, Paige and I will both be there. Cindy and Libby, who are our lobbyists, will be there as well. I also know Tom Chapman with the Catholic Conference and Dave Stone with United Way, I think have signed up. So we've got some other more experienced advocates who can be there. I know Paige has a couple scan volunteers who are not new to this, who have done this before and can help. So we'll have other people who will be there both to help fill out those slips, but also if there are specific questions about a bill. I'm going to basically be a floater in the rotunda between groups. I'm not going to be with a specific group, so that I can be kind of, hopping around if people need to flag someone down with a question. And it's also perfectly okay to say, if you get a question, to say, I'm not sure of, the answer to that, but I'd be happy to follow up with you. And then even if one of us isn't free in that exact moment, if we get that legislator's name and the question, we can be sure to follow up and get that information to them. So yeah, great question.
And
Do you
then
know
my
what
last
time?
question, sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry, I just wondered, when do the doors open? Is it 6:30 or is it 7?
I believe it's 6 o'clock.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I will be there probably at 6:30, 6:45-ish,
Okay.
but don't feel like you need to get there early.
The last
And
time I asked, I was told 6:30, but
Oh, okay. 6:30 is good then. Don't get
Okay.
there at 6 and stand outside in the cold.
Yeah, really, I don't want to do that.
and when the group photo?
So the group photo is going to be at 9.
Okay.
So we'll be starting kind of in the basement, and then we'll be walking up to the second floor, and kind of on the way, we'll take a photo on the steps. I also forgot to mention this, and I'm going to be sending this out in an email to everyone who registered. We will be having a photographer there who is working with the Washington Post on a story about the SNAP codification waivers nationwide. And they are sending a photographer who is going to be there for our day of action. So that's kind of cool. They're covering some other things and have other assignments for the story, but they will be there at the Capitol tomorrow morning. So just giving you all a heads up. And we can talk through, if you do not want to be photographed, we'll, make sure that we have a way to notify the photographer. But just wanted to give you all a heads up on that.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all. And we're really excited to see you tomorrow. And if you're not able to make it, feel free to, still take action and reach out with some emails during the day tomorrow. But yeah, we will see you bright and early. And please feel free to reach out between now and then with any questions.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks.